This is the NZXT H6 Flow. For the price, it's not good. It's excellent. It's a dual chamber mid-tower with an emphasis on GPU cooling, or at least that's what NZXT says. And I'm showing you the white model here, but you can also get it in black. And there's an RGB version that's basically the same, but swaps out those regular fans for RGB ones. For the price, I was expecting the overall build quality to be kind of cheap and flimsy, but that's not the case with this case. It's made from steel and tempered glass. There's no plastic or plexiglass panels. It's strong and sturdy feeling, and it's got some weight to it, coming in at nearly 10 kilograms. And none of the glass comes tinted, by the way. It's all just clear, transparent. The physical design's a little bit weird. It's not what comes to my mind anyway when I think about a PC case. It all comes down to this angled section right here. It completely changes the overall look, but it's for good reason, and I'll talk more about that in just a minute. There's no traditional front panel, it's just a pane of tempered glass, so you can't go mounting fans or radiators in this front area. The I/O panel's tucked down at the bottom rather than up top, which is also kind of unique to this case. There's 2 USB Type-A ports, 1 USB Type-C, an audio jack, and a big power button. The back has the I/O shield cutout, 7 expansion slots, and room for a 120mm fan or radiator. And this entire section back here is all ventilated. Over on this side, we have the power supply cutout. It's vertical and situated toward the upper section here. There's no removable plate or thumb screws for it, it's just a basic cutout with some screw holes. Up top, we have a removable steel mesh panel. It's a toolless design, just kind of pops off of there. And underneath, we have mounts for either 3 120mm fans or 2 140s, or you can fit radiators up to 360mm. Don't go expecting a removable mounting tray though, it's just your basic built-in type of mount. And there is a big opening up here to the secondary chamber on the other side, which should help reach cables and other stuff while you do your build. Now let's get back to this angled panel over here. It pops off tool-free, just like the top. This spot can take 320mm fans, and these ones that come pre-installed are the F120Q model made by NZXT. These guys have a max speed at 1200 RPM, and they can move about 62 CFM. The main focus of this case is the angled fan design. The idea is it intakes cool air from the outside and blasts it right over here where you have your GPU and other primary hardware. That is different from other dual chamber designs where they have the fans mounted flat against where the motherboard tray is. What that's gonna do is take your fresh air and blast it at the side panel that would be right here. And then it's gonna have to disperse and go wherever it needs to go from there. That's obviously not the most effective way to do airflow. Now over on this side, we have a metal panel with some ventilation holes. This one has a thumb screw that you need to take out to remove it. The awesome thing about dual chamber designs is all the space you get for cables and controller hubs and whatever else you want to mount out of sight. There's 3 Velcro cable straps here holding down the wires from the 3 pre-installed fans. There's various tie-down points all over the place where you can zip tie cables down to help with cable management. And there's cutouts and pass-throughs in the usual areas along the sides, top, and bottom to get your cables to the primary connection points on your system hardware on the other side. The power supply mounts up here on its side and it sits flush with the top cable pass-through cutout. You can mount PSUs up to 200mm in length, so there's no major restrictions on what PSU you get, despite the small compactness of the case. And there's a lot of room around here to be able to work with your modular cables. The open design really is builder-friendly that way. This is a removable drive cage. It supports 2 2.5-inch drives and 1 3.5-inch drive, and that's it. There's no other drive mounts in the case, so if that's not enough for you, you're gonna have to rely on M.2 drives installed on your motherboard or some kind of add-in expansion card or something like that. The main tempered glass panel comes off with a single thumb screw at the back. Since we don't have to mount the PSU on the bottom, NZXT gave us the option to mount 2 140mm fans down here. They fit perfectly and kind of snug into the space, and being the lowest point of the case, it makes sense to have these intaking fresh air from the outside. And the whole thing sits on a set of legs that keeps it propped up enough to not be restrictive in terms of airflow underneath. That's some good planning and design right there. Motherboard support includes ATX, Micro-ATX, and Mini-ITX. Things are tight in here with a full-size ATX board. I mean, you can see it right now, but I will show you in further detail. I'll show you some nice close-up shots in just a second so you can see some of those really tight areas. In terms of hardware limitations, the max CPU cooler height is 163mm, GPUs can fit up to 365mm, and radiators mounted up top can have a thickness up to 30mm. So the idea behind those angled fans makes a lot of sense, but the small compact layout of the case means you're gonna be obstructing some of that airflow before it ever has a chance to get to your GPU or other hardware. The main cable cutouts, for example, are gonna have your cables sitting right in the path of the airflow of those fans. All right, so for this build, I've got an Intel Core i7-13700K CPU and an Asus Z790 Prime motherboard with 32GB of DDR5 memory from G-Skill. It's being cooled by a Corsair H150i Elite LCD XT 360mm liquid cooler. The GPU is the Intel Arc A770 Limited Edition, and it's all powered by an ASUS 850 watt gold power supply. I added two 140mm Light Wings fans from Be Quiet down at the bottom in an intake configuration, and a single 120mm Silent Wings 4 Pro fan from Be Quiet at the back for exhaust. This is the absolute limit in terms of fans with the H6 Flow. I've got 9 of them in here, which is a lot for such a small case. So with this radiator up at the top, it hangs down into the exhaust zone of the upper fan on the angled intake panel. So that's obstructing some airflow. Then we have the main motherboard and GPU power cables obstructing some more. Now you could potentially route the GPU cables differently to optimize the airflow a bit better than I've done here, but still, with such a small compact build, there's just not a lot of options that won't impact your airflow in some way. It's just the way it is. Up at the top, it's very tight between these radiator fans and the top of the motherboard. It's a good idea to connect all your motherboard cables before you mount your radiator, otherwise you might not be able to get everything plugged in. That said, I think the finished build looks amazing in here. The small compact form factor doesn't leave a lot of empty space, so everywhere you look, you basically just see hardware, which is a look that I really like to have. And that's not something that's easy to achieve when you look at bigger cases. When it comes to cable management, my approach is to not do cable management. I've never cared about the hidden side of my builds enough to spend hours meticulously running each cable. I've got a lot of cables in this build. There's the standard PSU cables, plus some colored extensions, a fan and lighting control hub for the cooler, the case I/O cables, and a ton of fan and ARGB wires. The added depth you have with the dual chamber design really helps get the cables tucked into the space back there. It's a lot easier than having to keep things flat and kind of pressed up against the side like you have with standard ATX cases. And although I can't stand dealing with cables when I do a PC build, the H6 Flow actually made it a pretty painless process. I ran the system through a few tests to see what kind of cooling and acoustic performance levels it can hit. This shows the results for the CPU and GPU temps and the noise levels. With everything running at 100%, the performance looks pretty good, but with 9 fans spinning in this little case, it does create a decent amount of noise that you're gonna hear. The good news is dropping the fan speeds all the way down to 50% doesn't add all that much more temperature, but it shaves off a ton of noise. Dropping everything further down to 25% increases temperatures and doesn't take off that much more noise, so the sweet spot seems to be around 50%. Overall, this is good performance, both temperature-wise and in terms of overall sound and noise profiles. So the NZXT H6 Flow is a pretty awesome, compact, dual-chamber mid-tower case. It's a little bit unusual looking with its non-standard shape and layout, but it delivers in terms of performance and build quality. For the price, it offers good value for a dual-chamber window PC case from a major brand name in the industry. Check the description below for the latest pricing and details. I'll have all that stuff down there for you, along with some purchasing links. Give the video a thumbs up and get subscribed on your way out, and we'll see you soon.